mean, it's been a big revolution. I know that people have been asking me recently, say, what are you doing at Ritual Brewing Company? Are you not having sales anymore? And what I've done is I've just told everybody that we're still having sales. We'll do deliveries in the van, so if you wanted 2 cases at your house and you live within 10 miles, we would deliver. It's to go. You can come up and get a beer to go. Now, if you did come into Ritual Brewing Company and you said, hey, I really want to have a beer, I'm going to go ahead and allow you to come in and have a beer. I think there's going to be social distancing that's going to occur. We have a big facility if you haven't been to our place. It's a huge facility, so there's plenty of space. So there's different ways to working around it, and I think we're just going to grow into that. So Microbrew Revolution, let's see if we can't get into this. Website, thank you. Special thanks to the websites that the companies mentioned. I got to remember, I need to do both at the same time. So I've got 2 mouses. Greg Smith for the history of Suds of Civilization, Mesopotamia, and microbreweries, and beerhistory.com for the articles, North American Brewers Guild and writers for that, and Greg Smith, Beer History of, I just did that one. Okay, so in 1919, there wound up being a movement of people that were called the Temperance Movement. This was a very powerful set of, for lack of a better term, females that got together and said that they wanted to make alcohol illegal here in the United States. Well, that wound up being an issue because there were several other people that wound up gaining a lot of power through illegal distribution. Like I've said in class before, if you want drugs, you're going to get drugs. There's nothing we can do to stop you from that. And so somebody's always going to be able to provide you those drugs or that illegal substance, and there's going to be somebody making a bunch of money from that. So in 1919, 1920, there was a... Say that again?
Oh, so that's like where moonshine running and speakeasies came from.
Exactly. That's exactly where it came from. And if you do have something to chime in, definitely chime in like Travis. I'd love to be able to hear from you folks because it is your class and we're going to learn together. So in 1919, there was Prohibition. It meant all alcohol in the United States was illegal. Interesting fact that the White House never did run out of alcohol. It was, let me see if I don't get into that. It was vetoed by President Wilson, and by the act of Congress came back in and said, no, you guys are still going to make it illegal, and everything became illegal. So we had 19 years of prohibition, and so in 1933, commercial breweries became legal again. Home brewing of wine and or beer should have been legalized as well. In other words, what happened is the repeal, the 21st Amendment, the repeal of the 18th Amendment made it legal for people to have, make their own beer, and they could have their own beer in their cellar or in their, wherever they wanted it. But what they wound up doing is leaving out the term homebrew and beer and wine. So they made it legal for spirits, and wine, but beer was not put in there. So it wasn't until 1978 that Jimmy Carter came in and said, doesn't make any sense for us to not have home brewers. Why don't we allow home brewers or microbreweries to exist? And so thank you, Jimmy Carter. The first microbrewery in the United States was New Albion here in California, and it's since then been put out of business and went bankrupt, but it's a bummer. It is what it is. Things like that do happen. Okay, 1969, French Maytag. I don't know if you've had or heard of a Maytag washing machine and dryer. He took his money from his trust fund and decided to put it into a little brewery called Anchor Brewing Company in San Francisco. And he wanted to resurrect the style of steam beer. And a steam beer is exactly the opposite of a Kolsch. A steam beer is an ale yeast that, it is a lager yeast that is fermented at an ale temperature. And a Kolsch is an ale yeast that's fermented at a lager temperature. Did I say that right? A steam beer is an ale that's fermented at a lager temperature. and a Kolsch is a lager that's fermented at an ale temperature. So they're exactly the opposite. And I want to say that if you look at the beers that we're going to be tasting, it does say on there it's the opposite of one another. So a Kolsch is an ale that's fermented at a lager temperature, and a steam beer is a lager that's fermented at an ale temperature, the way I remember it. Hopefully I've said that right. If I'm not right, somebody look that up and let me know about this. It's not obvious at the time, but a revolution had begun. He brews high quality beer. Anybody ever had Anchorstein?
Yeah, I had one of them not too long ago.
They're not too bad. They're a little bit estery. They do have some of the sulfur compounds that you would expect from a lager that's done at a higher temperature. They're okay, but it's not one of my favorites. Let me see if I can't move this. Okay. Place to change the American palate for beer. What has been taking place to change the palate of American beer? 1977, the first brewery in Sonoma. This was what I was telling you about. I've got to remember which mouse. I have two mouses here. So in 1977, the first ale was served in a new brewery in Sonoma, California. This is the New Albion. Hold on a second. Guardian alarm at ritual. Sorry about that. I didn't silence my phone. I've got to remember to do that. So in 1978, Congress passes a bill that repealing the Prohibition law. This was Jimmy Carter that I just told you about. Carter signs that bill into law. Carter was a good guy. I liked him an awful lot. And I know that he's still around. And 77, 78, 79, 81. Sierra Nevada. Ken Grossman comes out and starts brewing a beer in basically a storage shed in his garage. And the first beer that he did was a stout, and they still produce this stout beer. However, it's a loser. Nobody ever buys it. It doesn't do well on the shelves, and sales are just plummeting. And I asked Ken. I said, Ken, why? Yeah, I said, why do you produce this stout that nobody buys? He says, well, it was the first beer we ever did, and it's the one beer that I really like, so I'm going to go ahead and produce it. So I guess if you've got that kind of money, you're good with that. I mean, might as well. Then Red Hook Brewery is still open in Seattle. They are a contract brewery to this date, producing beer for BJ's, which is kind of interesting. Decision to open Red Hook is based on two important factors. The import beer market was growing nationally. The Pacific Northwest had the highest per capita draft beer consumption in the country. The Pacific Northwest used to be considered the hop capital of the nation. They had more hops that they grew there. They had more hops that they consumed there than anybody else, and it wound up just being the hotbed for the microbrew industry. 1982, for the first time since Prohibition, a brewery is allowed to open not only that sells beer but on its own premise, but also serves food as well. This was Burt Grant's up in Yakima, and Yakima Brewing Company and Malting Company, and that was in Yakima. And I don't know if you've ever been to Yakima, but there's not much there. At least there wasn't when I went last time. There was one hotel. The entire town smells of hops all over the place. They grow a lot of apples and pears and some other things there, but most of it is hops. And it's a desert out there. It's all Indian reservation, or should I say Indigenous American reservation, and so it's on a lease. So ultimately, the farmers there will lose their property, and it will go back to the indigenous people. But the brew pub was born in Yakima Brewing Company, or up in Yakima. And I went there and had the lousiest service and saw the brewing system that he had there, and it was amazing to see that he actually took off. But here it is. If you don't have something, and all of a sudden you can have something, and it's a novel idea, then it winds up being something very, very popular. In 1983, in January, 51 brewery concerns operating a total of 80 breweries. Now, what I want you to do here is I want you to watch how fast it's growing. So in 83, There's only 51 brewing concerns. We've got another participant that wants to show up. And I'm not sure where it is, either that or somebody else left. So we've got 43% people that were in the class. There's 58, so we're only missing a few people, which is good. Thank you everybody for showing up. Got another participant that wants to show up. Vito, welcome. And then you've got a chat going on also. So I have to make sure that I audit this at the same time. What is considered a brewing concern? I'm glad you asked this question. A brewing concern is just a place that makes their own beer. Now, it could be a brew pub, it could be a microbrewery, it could be a regional brewery, it could be regional craft brewery, anybody that is a brewery concern. So just if you think about, my internet connection is unstable, so if I lose you or I cut out, I apologize for that. I really had nothing to do with it. Yesterday, 365, Outlook 365, which is I get through the university, went down and it crashed. So I'm not surprised that we don't have a problem. I'd love to see how many people we can get onto this Zoom and see how fast we can make it crash. That'd be kind of interesting for me. 1983. Come on. Mendocino Brewing Company. They're still around today. Opened as Hopland Brewery on August 14th, 1983. It's the first brew pub in California since Prohibition. Now, what is the definition of a brew pub? Remember, a brew pub has 25% of its own consumption is on site. 75% of its production is off-site. So it has to have that balance. Anything less than 25% of its own consumption on site no longer considers himself a microbrewery. That is 25% has to be consumed on site, and the rest of it can be served away. So if they were to consume 75% on site, that's still okay. They want to make sure that that balance is there. So it's the definition of a microbrewery. I think we covered that in the last couple classes. And they're still in operation today. Mendocino Brewing Company, what do they have? Red Hawk Ale or something like that? There's one that's out there that's a good beer. Uh-oh, I'm getting a chat. What's my chat say? Someone's going to be smart enough and tell me, Happy St. Patrick's Day. Happy St. Patrick's Day to you too. Now let me ask you, are you wearing orange or are you wearing green? Because if you're wearing, let me see if I can't move this over here to the side. If you're wearing green, that means you're Catholic, and if you're wearing orange, you raised your hand. So you're wearing green. I can see that it is in green. Thank you, Stanley. So you're Irish, and you're wearing green, so that means you're Catholic. I had somebody call me yesterday and ask me if we were still making green beer. And I said, we don't color beer here, and I'm not Catholic, I'm Protestant. And then they hung up on me. I'm okay with that. 84, there were 44 brewery concerns operating and a total of 83 breweries, microbreweries to begin to spread. Jim Koch, Boston Beer Company. I would be wearing orange. Thank you very much, Josh. Somebody else is wearing brown, and somebody else is wearing neither. You folks can't see the chat, can you? Or can you?
They should be able to.
Perfect. Well, then if you can. Great. We can see it. Perfect. Thank you very much. I'm glad. So do you like this format or this Zoom thing so far?
So far, it's almost exactly like Push.
Okay. It's like Push?
Twitch. It's the streaming thing for gaming.
Oh, yeah. See, so you got to... Vito, you keep cutting out. You must be having poor internet connection. So in 84, Jim Koch established his Boston Beer Company. In April 85, the first 25 cases of Boston Lager sold to a Boston bar, and then the rest is history. Nice enough guy. A lot of people don't like him, but I like him. He also owns Angel City Brewing Company in Los Angeles. I don't know if you know Angel City. Last year they won in the state of California, the Golden Bear, which is the best of show in the state of California. And we're doing a collaboration with them. Rachel is doing a collaboration with them. Welcome Astrid's Foam. In 1984, Pyramid Brewing Company brews its first batch in Kalama, Washington. Pyramid is known for their American-style Hefeweizen. Good. American-style Hefeweizen. And they wound up putting an orange on top of it. It was kind of funny the way that they came up with the Hefeweizen. They used to make what was called a Crystal Weiss. A Crystal Weiss is a Hefeweizen or a Weizen beer that has been filtered. The popularity of the beer was so much so that they wound up having to rush the beer. And in rushing the beer, they didn't filter it. And not filtering it made it a Hefeweizen. Remember, Hefeweizen is a yeasty wheat beer. What collaboration are you doing with Angel City Brewing Company? We haven't decided the style of beer yet. We're looking at they won for a cream ale. We won the golden beer for a barley wine. So we're looking to see what would sell. Let me ask you, if I did a collaboration with Angel City Brewing Company, what kind of beer would you drink? And so I say, yeah, you like it so far? Yeah, I like it. So who's gifting subs to the class though? I don't know what that means, but I hear crashing because of a demand. There might be crashing because of a demand. I think I know what you're talking about. What collaboration are you doing? Okay. All right, and then Whitmer Brothers is founded in Oregon. Astrid, your phone must be low in ability to be able to stay on the internet because you keep crashing. Whitmer Brewing Company is founded in Oregon. Whitmer, nice enough guys, did real well. Great brewery, very clean. Their beer's kind of okay to deal with. I mean, it's not the best beer. And then in '85, there was a brewery that was founded in Modesto, called St. Stan's Brewing Company. Then there was Pete's Brewing Company. Pete Schlagberg began brewing his hobby back in 1979. Over the past several years, Pete became more passionate about beer. In '86, Pete's Brewing Company was formed and Pete's Wicked Ale was marketed. And then with Pete's Wicked Ale, he wound up selling that and making a bunch of money. Last time I saw Pete, he had just gotten a big fat check and he was smoking a big fat cigar at the top of a pub in, I think it was in Portland. But anyways, I digress. In '86, Lost Coast Brewing Company, idea developed by Wendy Pound. Lost Coast is female owned. It was a marriage counselor and a pharmacist in Northern California. Lost Coast is currently a regional specialty brewery in Eureka. What does that mean? Anybody? Specialty, which means that it's an all malt beverage. So they've got to be able to have a specialty beer that's classified as an all malt beverage. And they're regional because of their size. Portland Brewery Company is founded in Oregon. '87. Full Sail Brewing Company is founded in Hood River, Oregon. You get an opportunity to go to Full Sail. It's a great place. When we did the tour there, the guy that gave us a tour kept calling it a fermentator. I said, the fermentator over here is 100 barrels and this and that. And I said, don't you mean fermenter? He goes, no, fermentator. I thought, wow, that's kind of different. But anyways, '87, Anderson Valley Brewing Company is formed. They're a regional craft brewery. What is a regional craft brewery? Remember, it's like a specialty brewery. It's got an all malt craft beverage. North Coast Brewing Company opens up in Fort Bragg. Dan Gordon and Dean Biersch opened up Gordon Biersch Brewing Company. Dan Gordon still owns the brewery in San Jose, and it does real well. It produces Kirkland brand and a couple of other brands. He does a great Märzen, a good Oktoberfest beer. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't get it down here. He stays very regional with his beer, and I don't blame him. '89, Rogue Ale Public House, Oregon, originally named Bayfront Brewery, opened in May. Currently a regional craft brewery. And then Pike Brewing Company was created in Seattle. If you've ever been to Seattle, you've got to go to Pike Brewing Company. It's the market downtown, and they wind up, you wind up walking up to the front of the marketplace, and they throw fish back and forth. So you got one guy throwing a fish to the other guy and calling out that fish, and then you keep walking back inside into this old style marketplace, and eventually you wind up in the middle of it, and there's a brewery literally right in the middle of this place, and it's down there. You have to walk down several floors in order to get a beer, and it's always very packed. Great beer, great influence on the microbrew industry. Get an opportunity, definitely go there. Then in 1990, Sierra Nevada Brewing Company, my buddy Ken Grossman, brews over 31,000 barrels of beer. I want to say last year they did over 310,000 barrels of beer. And Chico becomes the first startup microbrewery to break out of that classification. It is still privately held by the Grossmans. I'm very proud that they're able to do that. And they are also 100% green, which means they have solar powered and they have backup hydrogen batteries for their facility. They also wind up filtering all their water. Their effluent, the water that they put down the drain is cleaner than the water they get from the city. And the city charges them for that water back. Am I missing something, Eric? Oh, you're pulling stuff. Okay. Elizabeth. Welcome, Elizabeth. You make it still number 44. 1991, New Belgium Brewing Company caps its first bottles from Fort Collins, Colorado. Anybody ever had a fat tire?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, then you know exactly what it is. Astrid, you're probably going to need to get yourself a better connection. I'm not sure where you're at, but you're probably going to need to get a landline because you keep cutting in and out. And thank you, folks, for your comments. Great, one of my favorites. I appreciate that because it does help the class go by quicker. 95, approximately 500 breweries are operating in the United States. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to start thinking about, so from 1919 to currently where we're at, so the beer trends and how the beer industry has grown and how it continues to grow. We are just past the point of where we were at pre-Prohibition back in the 1880s, and we've finally gotten back to that point. So it's fascinating to see how this goes. So 95, approximately 500 breweries are operating in the United States and are estimated to increase at a rate of 3 or 4 per week. Gosh, I want to say we're probably opening up closer to 10 a week right now. In California itself, we've got over 1,000 breweries. In 99, for the first time in history, each state has at least one operating brewery, be it a regional craft brewery, a brew pub, or some other kind of brewery. In 1999, 49 states have brew pubs. And I'm trying to think if there's not a place where, come on, you can do it, there you go, where we don't have a microbrewery. So U.S. production of U.S. breweries from 1864 to 1919. Take a look at that 1909, and then there's a rise there, and then all of a sudden it dips off. As it's dipping off, that's Prohibition. And then so from 1924 to 1933, you see the mafia come in, and they start exercising their muscles and start delivering beer from Canada, start bringing in rum from Jamaica and Puerto Rico and Cuba and such, and I can't blame them. Why not? Problem we had with that, there were several people that were producing a less than superior product. Several people went blind because of the type of alcohol they were using, or they made different types of alcohol, like a fusel alcohol. Fusel alcohol is the kind of alcohol you want to burn in your car, and it'll definitely give you a headache. It's a lot of methanol. And is Kirkland Kirkland label any good? I don't think so. I don't particularly like it. I don't buy it. I won't buy it. I think it's kind of watered down. It's kind of bland. It's disappointing from what Gordon Biersch is. If you go out and get yourself a Gordon Biersch Helles or a Märzen or something else like that, you're going to wind up tasting the Kirkland brand and realize that it's not that great. So now, one more time.
Oh, that's good vodka.
You know,
That vodka's actually really good.
I haven't tasted their vodka, but I'll believe you for that. And then, so, U.S. history highlights. Finally, in 2006, there's 50 regional craft breweries. There's 364 microbreweries, 975 brew pubs, for a total of 1,389 craft brew operations. That's in 2006. Now we have over 6,000. So in the last 13, 14 years, we've grown that much. Also, there's 20 large breweries, and those breweries would include Budweiser, Coors, Miller, 24 regional breweries, that'd be Sierra Nevada, Stone, New Belgium, probably Pyramid, probably Red Hook, and then some others. And there's 4 other non-craft breweries. Let's think about Kirin, Budweiser, Coors, Miller, or something else like that. And then I've got the historical U.S. brewery count here. One of the new ones that I've just put in here, and I'd like you to take a look at that. I'm going to minimize this so I don't have to see the chat. And you'll see the last few years we are on a huge, huge spike. Is this a good thing? Is there a bubble going to pop? I don't think so. But if you look back in 1975, 76, 77, back when I was in high school, we didn't have much good craft beer. The best thing that we had out there was probably Michelob. It wasn't Michelob Ultra, it was Michelob. That was a big high-end beer, and if you could afford it, Heineken was a big one for as far as an import. And then when I got out of college and started moving into the microbrew business, back in 94, 95 is when I started getting into the microbrew business at a place called Riverside Brewing Company. That wound up doing very well for me, and we grew. You can see there's a little level plateau, and then back in 12, 13, it just really starts peaking, and it continues to grow to this date. And I'm excited about it. Is there an end in sight? I don't foresee one. However, with the way that things are going today, and I mean that sarcastically, we are going to go and other modes of getting beer out there to the consumer. I think the consumer is going to have to be a little bit more savvy in being able to get their beer. They're probably going to find out what's easiest. I know our beers on it, I probably shouldn't say this, Stater Brothers, Vaughn's, and Albertsons, you can go there and pick it up, and the shelves are probably pretty empty because people are rushing in there to grab beer and toilet paper. I'm okay with that. And then U.S. Brewery Count. Does it make any? Does it do any good for me to look at this thing here in the background for you, or is it just kind of out of the way and not necessary? Okay. All right. Thanks for the feedback on that. Appreciate. Oh, here I got a chat. It's not necessary, Clifton.
But for the video for YouTube, we need it.
Right. Now, I guess the only reason I'm having it in the background is because we are putting this on YouTube, and I want to be able to post this later. So it's a little unnecessary since the screen share is working. Great, so the screen share is working, and you say it's not necessary. Thank you, Phoebe and Clifton, on that, and Hannah. Okay, not necessary. Screen sharing is working good enough. Great. So U.S. Craft Brewery Count by category. Let me see, regional breweries are in the light green one, dark blue ones are the microbreweries, and the orange ones are brew pubs. Brew pubs, remember, this is a place where they wind up having beer on site. I'm thinking Riverside Brewing Company way back when. And then there were, let me see, Heroes is now there. And so if a place brews beer on site and they have their own food, then they're considered a microbrewery. Then you have other places, let's say like Green Cheek. Green Cheek is a microbrewery that's in Anaheim, and they don't serve any food there. Do they have food purveyors that come in every so often? Yes. Do they distribute their beer? They have a distributor do it for them? Yes. But then they also wound up taking their license and duplicating it and putting it and buying it into another location. They're now in Laguna Niguel. They're at the old Barley Forge. And so they wound up replicating their license, and at Barley Forge they can have food. So now they are a brew pub and a microbrewery at the same time. Is it legal? Yes, but they can only replicate their license 5 times. Once they replicated it 5 times, then they need to go out and get themselves another brewery. Something else goes along with that, another license. So, current U.S. brewery count, Craft breweries 14 all the way up to, let's say, 17 and 18 and the percent of change. Let's take a look at 2018. There were 7,346 brewery concerns. 230 of those are regional craft breweries. 4,522 of those are microbreweries, and there's 2,594 brew pubs. Large non-craft, there's 104. What's a large non-craft? Budweiser, Coors, Miller, those type of folks. U.S. total breweries is up to 7,450. That's huge. That's the highest it's ever been. So we're at a peak now to where we've got more breweries here, more microbreweries, more everything else. Is that you, Eric, that faded out again? So your internet's going in and out?
No, my phone needs battery.
Your phone needed a battery. Got it. Well, if your phone needs battery, make sure you're nice and charged up here for these things. So, okay, so then we're done with this one, I think.
You done?
There, we're done with that one. So we're going to take a 5-minute break.